This is Eddie Hearn, Matchroom Boxing. You are watching Sporting Icons. You don't need to be anywhere else.
Now, I see a lot of comments over the last couple of years saying how Eddie Hearn is the best promoter in the world. I also see a lot of people commenting saying that he's not. It's just that he was given the keys to the kingdom. He was given everything on a plate. So that's what we're going to talk about in this video. And of course, Eddie Hearn, he isn't shy telling you that he is the #1 boxing promoter in the world as well. Okay. Now, to say that he's the best boxing promoter in the world, well, what's the criteria? Is it because he's built a superstar in Anthony Joshua? Is it a case of he's seen as the best boxing promoter in the world because maybe Sky Sports were the best boxing promoter around? Maybe they made Eddie Hearn. There's so many different ways of looking at it. Would it be a case of, had somebody else got the keys to the kingdom instead of Eddie Hearn, maybe they would have done equally as good job, if not better? Or maybe they would have flopped. Now, one thing to look out for, I suppose, would be that Ben Shalom is currently the new head of boxing promotions with Sky Sports. Of course, he's currently building his stable. Some of the fighters already know who's going to be signing with Sky Sports, or that will be announced in due course. But Ben Shalom currently is where Eddie Hearn once was. When Eddie Hearn first came onto the boxing scene, he was a little bit like a deer in the headlights. But of course, you could see the influence of Barry. Even now, when you hear Eddie Hearn talk, it reminds me of Barry Hearn. So he's got that influence of Barry. And of course, it's not just a case of Barry Hearn introduced him to Sky and convinced Sky to give Eddie Hearn the job and basically gave him the keys. That's one thing. But of course, he's also got Barry Hearn always there as an advisor all the way through, a bit of guidance. But all those things are set to make you the kind of person that you are. Now, would it be a case of that Anthony Joshua, for example, because of course he's a global superstar and he's been under Eddie Hearn's banner since his professional debut? Maybe Joshua was always going to be a huge superstar. If he'd have signed with Frank Warren, he was always going to be a superstar. If he'd have signed with Lennox Lewis, that was an option for him. Maybe he was still going to be a global superstar. But I think that Eddie Hearn is popular because of Sky Sports, because of the production of Sky Sports, because of the money that Sky Sports put up for him to go out and get a stable, increase the stable, and of course put it out there for the world to see. How would Eddie Hearn have got on as a small hall promoter without TV? What would happen if Sky Sports gave those keys to Mick Hennessy? Well, was it 10 years ago now? How would it have been if Sky Sports gave the keys to Mark Clauzel? Gave them to Phil Jeffries or Matt Jobs or Dennis Hobson, Joe Gallagher? Would they have done equally as good a job as Eddie Hearn? Now, I think a lot of it with Eddie Hearn is the fact that he is pretty much a carbon copy of his dad. Now, of course, I've met Eddie Hearn on a few occasions. I've interviewed him, I've interviewed Barry as well on podcast. Both real and nice guys. I don't have a negative thing to say about them for the discussions and everything that I've had with them in the past. But he's a very likable guy. And I think that's what helps when it comes to Eddie. Very, very likable guy. Even when you don't have the camera in front of him, he is very much a chatty kind of person. He is the kind of person to hold the audience of a room. That's what he does. His personality is what wins him over. So if you're a boxing promoter and you don't have that kind of personality where the audience can resonate with you, then you're not going to go too far. And by that, what I mean is, if you look at, say, other people who's been given keys to certain kingdoms, such as Richard Poxon, for example, he was given the keys with ITV. Didn't do too much with it because he didn't have the personality. Does Ben Shalom, does he have the personality? I don't know. I don't know too much about him. In time, of course, we'll find out, and I'm sure that I'll meet him and I'll interview him on a few occasions and that as well. In fact, I know I will. So maybe his personality will come across and he will resonate. But again, people, they are going to judge him based on what Eddie Hearn has done. But at the same time, maybe what Eddie Hearn has done is because of Sky Sports. Maybe Eddie Hearn got the gig with DAZN because of Sky Sports. And you have to say, yes, he did. But again, anybody can be given the keys, such as Ben Shalom has just been given the keys, hasn't he? But what's he going to do with it? He's going to have to build his stable right now. Back when Eddie Hearn first got the job, Not many people knew who Eddie Hearn was outside of being the son of Barry Hearn. He was a deer in the headlights. He did seem a little unsure at times, but again, his personality would win him over. He'd go out in Hull, in the middle of the street, and sell strawberries for a few minutes. He would do that kind of thing. Of course, he had, say, IFL helping him out in that as well, putting out his name, putting out his brand. Now he's a brand. He's not just Eddie Hearn, Barry Hearn's son, boxing promoter. He's a brand in himself now. But is a lot of that down to Sky Sports? You have to say yes. But most of it is down to his personality. What would have happened if they'd given Mark Clauzel, for example? Mark Clauzel is a funny guy, is a very, very people guy as well. If Sky Sports had given him the gig, for example, I believe that he would have done a very good job with himself and that as well. As would many, many other people. Because again, when you look at, say, Frank Warren is old school. Much like Bob Arum is old school. Again, I've interviewed Bob Arum on a couple of occasions where we've even spoken about the difference of the past to today. And he says that today he struggles. Because back in the day, things were kept behind wraps. They were kept behind doors. People didn't really know who was going to be fighting who and what the purses were until it was pretty much announced. Nowadays, you can't really sneeze without somebody knowing about it. He's always having to justify every little thing nowadays. And again, with Barry as well. I had this conversation with Barry Hearn, which is the difference between today's promoting and back in the day. Now, again, back in the day, you can look at, say, Barry Hearn, you can look at Frank Warren here in the UK and say, but they managed to build names without the internet, without social media. They managed to build Prince Nassim Hamid, Joe Calzaghe, Ricky Hatton, Chris Eubank, Lennox Lewis in the early part, Frank Bruno, and the list goes on, Nigel Benn, etc. So they managed to do that without internet. Could Eddie Hearn have done that? It's a question we don't really know. I think they probably would have been able to be honest. But Barry Hearn, would he struggle in this particular era? Maybe. Bob Arum says that he struggles at times. I think Frank Warren does as well. So in this particular era, you have to say that Eddie Hearn is probably the best because he's probably the most famous. Why is he famous? Because he was given the budget. He couldn't have done what he'd done on Sky Sports without the budget. When he originally signed up, say, Carl Froch wasn't a pay-per-view fighter. And without Eddie Hearn, I don't think he would have been. Well, without that George Groves fight, I don't think he would have been. It was George Groves who sold that fight. I'm not saying that Carl Froch didn't have a fan base. Of course he did. But I'm saying pay-per-view level. Eddie Hearn, yes, okay, he brought back pay-per-view on a monumental scale. Maybe that could be seen as a criticism. But at the same time, you can look at other pay-per-view fighters, previously like Kell Brook. Kell Brook was one of his first signings. In fact, he may have actually been his first signing for Eddie Hearn, Matchroom and Sky Sports. But without the might of Sky Sports behind him, how would he have done? How would he have done if he was just a small hall promoter? Would he have still been a success? Arguably, but again, that's because he was brought into a privileged lifestyle because of his dad obviously done very, very well in business. And again, a lot of people, they don't like Eddie Hearn because of that, because he hasn't had to work for it. Well, he has had to work for it because you can give anybody the keys. It don't mean they're going to run with it. Eddie Hearn run with the cards that he was dealt. You can't hate somebody because they were born into a privileged lifestyle just because our parents didn't bring us into that lifestyle. You can't hate somebody for it. And if you do, it's probably down to jealousy, right? Maybe you're mad at your own parents. I don't know. Don't get me wrong. I would have loved my parents to have brought me into a privileged lifestyle. Unfortunately, that wasn't the hand that I was dealt with. When you have to build up from nothing to something, it's far harder than already meeting them at halfway, which is what Eddie Hearn done. He had to. He was given the keys and meeting them at halfway. He didn't have to do all the groundwork to start with. But of course, he had good people around him who could advise him, say, yeah, sign up Carl Froch, sign up Kell Brook, sign up this guy, sign up that guy, etc. So he had the right people and that around him. Is it down to Barry Hearn? Yes. But we're talking about boxing promotion here in today's era. He knows how to handle people. He's a people person. He comes across as a nice guy. Some people say he's arrogant. Yeah, he is arrogant, and I've called him that as well. But at the same time, he does take that criticism. In some ways, I mean, not necessarily from me, because he's gone a bit AWOL with me at the minute, but I think that in general, he is a good person, but he's a business-minded person. He's driven because of his dad. He wants, and I'm sure that he'll admit it as well, he wants his dad to look at him and say that he's proud. That's probably why he does it. That's probably what drives him. Because the business is already going to be successful, even if Eddie Hearn retires right now. The business is going to be successful. The foundations have been there for a long time. And Barry Hearn, he is very proud of Eddie. What is it that he told me once in one of the interviews that we've done, where he says that if he could be reincarnated, he'd like to be reincarnated as Eddie. Is that just him talking about just because he's his son? Maybe, of course. You're always going to be biased with your own kids. But I think that when it comes to Eddie Hearn being the best boxing promoter in the world, again, you have to say so, because you can be given the keys to the kingdom, but not everybody can take that ball and run with it. Not everybody can kick the door off its hinges. We can make a reference to say that Tyson Fury, he's the reason why Anthony Joshua's got all these belts. Well, not really, because while he defeated Vladimir Klitschko, and yes, all the belts got fragmented because of things that Tyson Fury was doing outside the ring and everything. So Tyson Fury, again, he unlocked the door. Anthony Joshua came along and kicked the door off the hinges. So the point is, you can be given the opportunity, but nobody can seize the opportunity. Eddie Hearn has seized the opportunity. Maybe had Sky Sports had given the gig to Mick Hennessy, maybe Mick Hennessy would have done an even better job. Or maybe he wouldn't have done. Because obviously their personalities are totally different. But there's enough people out there with a very good personality. There's enough people out there who are very comfortable in front of the camera. Look at Richard Poxton. He flopped when it came to ITV. That was a big gig. ITV is on everybody's TV station in the United Kingdom. Everybody who's got a TV and you have a working aerial, you have ITV. Somehow managed to mess it up. But again, that's not his fault. That's because he didn't have the personality. That's because maybe he wasn't given enough time to build a stable. Mick Hennessy currently on Channel 5 and that, he's building a stable. He's got the likes of Shakan Pitters and Dinamangi and quite a few others. He's building a stable. Mick Hennessy is probably the best in the United Kingdom for talent finding. He's the one who found, for example, say, or at least given the opportunities to, say, a Carl Froch, Tyson Fury, Hughie Fury, and the list goes on. His resume stands alone for his talent finding. But he doesn't have the financial backing. He doesn't have the might of Sky Sports. At the minute, he's got a might of Channel 5, which I'm sure is pretty decent. Dennis Hobson, what would happen if he'd have been given the keys to Sky Sports? How would he have done? His personality is all right. He comes across as a good guy. But again, he's not a kind of person who's active on social media. To be successful at this particular era, you have to be very active on social media. Eddie Hearn used to be very, very active on social media, as in interacting with the fans. Not so much now. I think now he's quite selective. Even with, say, media, he's very selective. He does allow cornering of the markets. He does. But at the same time, in some ways, it's understandable. You know, he's helping out those who helped him out in the old days, such as IFL. They are really the only kind of ones. So quite where Boxing Social came in. I mean, again, Boxing Social, they're a media created. So they were started by people already in the business. So of course, they already had foots in the doors and that, for example. But with Eddie Hearn, when you compare him to, say, Bob Arum, of course, in today's era, he's a better promoter than Bob Arum. He's a better promoter than Frank Warren, than Kathy Duva. Oscar De La Hoya, again, Oscar De La Hoya should be equally as good as Eddie Hearn because he was given the platform such as HBO. Now, of course, he's on DAZN. Yes, he managed to build Canelo Alvarez from virtually nothing, didn't he? But again, that's because Oscar De La Hoya, he had his own fame. He had his own platform because he's Oscar De La Hoya. He's a golden boy, right? But outside of Canelo, who's he really beat? Ryan Garcia, maybe. But again, a lot of it's down to social media. It is down to social media. I do think that Eddie Hearn is a better boxing promoter than Oscar De La Hoya. I think Oscar De La Hoya is very bitter at times. But I think jealousy does breed content, which is why I think say Frank Warren, whenever he talks about Eddie Hearn, he's very bitter about Eddie Hearn. Because Eddie Hearn knows how to handle today's boxing fans. Some people love him. Some people hate him. But either way, you're going to watch these shows. He does put on a lot of cack. Let's be honest, he puts on a lot of rubbish. And it is, and I'll say it again, it's worrying when your main headline was Conor Benn versus Adrian Granados. And again, that's not a disrespect to Conor Benn. Conor Benn is still early in his days. He's still early. He hasn't won any belts yet. He hasn't won the English, the British, or the Commonwealth, or the European, or anything like that. So how do you call him the next pay-per-view fighter? That's worrying for me. You can't just thrust people, like fighters, onto the boxing public. The boxing public will accept who they accept and not back who they don't want. You can't force them on people. He says that Joshua Buatsi could be the next pay-per-view fighter. Maybe he can. Maybe he can't. But his matchmaking, there is a lot to be desired. That's for sure. Is he losing touch with boxing fans? Not really. I think that maybe he's a little bit arrogant at the minute. Again, I've called him arrogant. I've told you that before. I've called him that. And he has apologised for certain things in that before. But at the same time, he ain't going to change. For him, he's living in his own lane right now. Everybody else is not invited in his lane as far as other boxing promoters are concerned. But I think in answer to the question, is he the best boxing promoter in the world? You have to say in today's era, yes. Would he go down as the best boxing promoter of all time? I don't know. I think that you have to weigh into the fact that they didn't have internet when Don King was doing it, when Bob Arum was doing it, when Frank Warren was doing it back in the days and that as well, and the Duvers and whatever else. But people became global superstars, Muhammad Ali, Mike Tyson and so forth, without internet. Imagine that they had internet then. Imagine how much bigger they would have been. But you have to give Eddie Hearn all the credit in the world. But go back to the original point. Now Ben Shalom has been given the keys to the kingdom with Sky Sports. Maybe it was Sky Sports who made Eddie Hearn. If it wasn't for Sky Sports, Eddie Hearn wouldn't probably even be in boxing. Maybe he became popular because of Sky Sports, because of how their production team put it out there, because of the commentary, because of the punditry, because of how it looked on TV. Like it or don't like it, people are speaking about it because of Sky Sports. So if they do the same kind of model with Ben Shalom, of course, he's currently building his stable, as I've already said. That'll be announced real soon. And it's all going to be starting again. It's going to feel different. It's going to feel a little bit new. But are they going to build him up to where in a few years' time, people are going to be having a conversation, well, who's the best in the world? Eddie Hearn or Ben Shalom? Maybe there's going to be some other ones coming through. Mark Clauzel, for example. Maybe Dennis Hobson's going to make a huge comeback. Of course, he's got that Fight Zone. Previously with, was it Eurosport and that I think he was with? And that free-to-air TV one. If you can get TV, you can do something with it. If you get the budget, you can do something with it. And when you've got a platform like Sky Sports, I don't think you can really fail too much. Or maybe you can. We'll have to wait and see how Ben Shalom gets on. But I think Ben Shalom is going to do a pretty good job. Anyway, my thoughts, you drop me yours. Click thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll catch you all in the next video.